Right, I think we've sorted out the sound issues now, so we're going to get going. So, how do we prepare a bed from the beginning to the end? So, the reasons behind it are very varied. So, if we just start from the beginning, we can sort of work our way through. So, when we prepare the bed, what I'm using here is a tractor with a tilling machine on the back, a tilling attachment I should say, with a bed shaper. So the bed shaper on the farm is 90 centimetres at the bottom, 75 centimetres at the top. That standardises all the rows to the same size. All the rows here are exactly the same length, which also standardises plants, so we know the amount of plants that are going in each row. So when we first get going, what we do is we send a soil test off to the laboratory, EAL, we do it at Lismore. They send us back the results of what our soil is deficient in. We apply those minerals to the soil after the first till. So we come through, all the grass is still on, everything's still in place. We've mowed the grass down really low, and we come in with the tiller and we till it. We spread those soil amendments over the top. We've got a massive pile of compost down there as well. Compost gets applied, and that bed then is allowed to sit there for a full week. The beds down here, they didn't get that full week. Now this farm leapt out of the ground in about 11 or 12 weeks. So everything that you see here has all been done in that 11 or 12 weeks. It's a constantly expanding farm. We get more and more distribution ways, so we need to constantly expand the farm. So it's in a constant expansion at the moment. Hopefully soon it won't be expanding so much further, but this is about as much as I want to do down here in this market garden. So once all those minerals are applied, the compost is applied, we do the secondary till. That secondary till is not as deep as the first till. It's a lot shallower, and we're just trying to mix those minerals into, I don't know, the top 20 or 30 centimetres of the soil. So once we've mixed that soil, we've germinated the seeds in that first week. We continually water it, and by doing that second till, we're creating an almost stale seed bed. So down here you can see we're in a rush. We rushed it big time. We didn't get a chance to create that stale seed bed like we wanted. So it's a little bit out of control, but that's fine. We'll talk about maintenance in a minute. So the way we look at it is that the bed widths are also in line with the bed width of the tractor. So all of our paths are just the width of the wheel of the tractor. As we move through to different technology for different farming operations, obviously I saw a episode. We had a little hoe me. Everyone knows a hoe me. It's a little handheld trowel, and we were bending over to do all the weeding. One night I watched Gardening Australia, and she came up with a wire weeder that she built herself. So now we stand up to wire weed, and it's just because we plant on these triangles. It's just a matter of running up through those triangles, topping all those weeds off. It's a lot quicker than bending over with the hoe me. So really honing down on the processes of production and trying to save yourself as much time. That's really the direction we're trying to head here. Creating opportunities where weeds won't germinate because of the stacking that we do also. You can see up here, once again, this area wasn't prepared as well as this area up here. The Asian greens, you can see no weeds at all. So just that extra bit of care going into that bed preparation style, and thinking about how we're going to germinate those weeds before we start planting, to create almost a stale seed bed. So obviously you still have to do a little bit of weeding, but not a great deal. So the next thing is bed maintenance. So actually, let's talk about soil structure. So you can see here, it looks a little bit dry on top, but the instant we peel that back, you can see we've got that moistness straight away. Over here, you can see when this bed was prepared, we had a little less rain. The soil is a lot softer. It crumbles up quite easily. As we come over here, this bed was prepared when the soil was a little bit too wet. So you can start to peel this one apart, and you can see we're creating big granules. We've chunked it together just a little bit too much. This is the old lettuce cycle that used to run through here. So we let the old crop sit in here for 2 weeks. All those seeds that are sitting there on top will germinate. We come through, skim off the top, and we're ready to start planting. So down here in these beds, you can see not prepared as well as we would have liked at the start, but that's okay. It's now created this sort of environment where we can come in and grab slices of this weed and chop and drop it all the way around through the system. So you can see we're doing a chop and drop inside what is an annual system. Transitioning that food forest train of thought into a modern day market garden. So I think we might answer some questions, have we?
Yeah, I've got a question, Arran.
Yeah.
Somebody's asked a question about whether you lose much erosion and much moisture because you know, the soil is not covered with mulch or anything like that.
Not covered with mulch, okay.
Yeah, and so how would you know if you were losing it as well?
How would you know? Well,
yeah.
Obviously it is going to be losing something. The soil management plan of using compost, thinking about biology and keeping biology intact, that's why we only skim the very top layer of the soil now, where we're really thinking about minimum tillage, leaving that soil structure intact underneath,
okay.
so that's what's holding all of our water down there. It's more of an organic way of thinking about it. The reason why we don't use mulch here is we originally used mulch, and being so close to zone 5, we've got bush turkeys. So the instant we put mulch down, the bush turkeys would just rip it in half. So
yeah.
we had to retrain our way of thought of using mulch, because it's just going to be destroyed by bush turkeys, and thinking about decreasing the size of the spaces that we plant the plants, so that when the plants grow, they're all touching themselves at climax, creating that living mulch over the top of the soil, rather than thinking about actually using mulch itself.
Yeah, okay.
It's the systems inside itself that help create that soil always being covered by plants. Yeah, okay. We're only out of plants for 2 weeks here, you know,
yeah.
and then we're back in.
Yeah, sure. It's a quick turnover.
And we're planting very biointensively, and in a lot of different areas we're using different species at the same time in the same bed as well. Yeah, so they're trying to think about it in that sort of it'd be lovely to cover it with mulch.
I've got a live question here, if
yeah,
that's all right.
Cool.
So this is from Jess. I see you've got brassicas. What method do you use to deal with pests? For instance, the cabbage moth. The cabbage moth, yes. So in a home situation, you aren't planting as many as I'm planting, obviously. So in a home situation, I'd be picking them off. In a market garden situation, we're on a whole different level here. So we use Bacillus thuringiensis. It's a naturally occurring bacteria. It's organically certified, and it's a contact spray that only targets caterpillars. So when it touches the caterpillars die, and that's the method that we use. We don't use systemics, we don't use neem, we don't use pyrethrum. My sort of, and this is controversial, my train of thought is that those sort of things are harming the beneficial things that we want to keep. We only specifically target cabbage moth, and what we're trying to do is create an environment in which the plant itself is that strong that the bugs won't attack it. It's not sending the signals that I'm weak, and once we start thinking about it in that sort of direction and keeping those plants as healthy as possible during their life cycle. So once a week they also get a spray of molasses mixed with fish
seaweed, and a little tiny bit of liquid humus. That's my secret ingredient, liquid humus.
It's not secret anymore.
Yeah, that's not secret. Yeah, I know.
That's what this is all about, sharing ideas. Thank you, Arran.
No worries.
We're going to call the video Arran's Secret Reveal.
Yeah, secret recipe. So that gets sprayed out on a weekly basis, and that keeps that plant health, but also those caterpillars at a real minimum. Yeah.
Thank you.
No worries.
Now, were you going to talk us through some of the maintenance on the beds?
Yeah, sure. So the wire weeder that we just showed you up there, if we just walk back up, that's one of the main tools that we use here on the farm once the plants are in. Once again, we just run that on the diagonal. The Karma is the other tool that I use quite regularly. It works the best in those beds that weren't prepared quite as well as the others. And of course, the tractor down there and the Elia 3000. So this is a multi-stage tool designed and built in Australia that is powered by a drill. So the drill's not obviously attached, but the drill attaches here. It's got a little wheel on the back, multiple attachments on that. So this one comes through and just knocks off all the tops of the old crop cycle. So this would come through spinning at a rate and knock all the tops off and drop that to the ground. The next tool is obviously the tilter. So that's the one inside there at the moment, and that just lightly, finely grades the top of the soil to create that fine tilth that we've got on a lot of these beds here. The third tool is one that I am still trying to get my head around. It's a great tool, but the way that I have prepared all my beds means that this tool is unusable at the moment. What it is designed for is running up through the middle of the path. You can see now with the new bed widths, we're starting to widen this path just a little bit. You can see up in the old sections we're only at 150, 200 mil path widths. But as we start to think about the process of production and moving towards a more slimline, efficient model, the use of these tools are going to be key to moving the market garden and allowing me to move to more space. And that's what it's really all about. The quicker I can do it, the more space I can take up. So this tool is a hiller, so it works one way and it hills the soil. You can see the double corkscrew there. So one way hills the beds, and when we drag it backwards, it skims the very, very top of that path, so that I don't have to no longer go down it with a hoe and hoe it up. So they're just tools that we use to try and efficiently manage a market garden so that the market gardener can move to more space. And that's really the number one key is trying to think about the process of production right from the start right to the finish, making things easier for yourself all the way through. And that way you can take up more and more and more space.
Jason, have there been any questions come up?
There hasn't,
Okay,
but there's some comments from Costa. He's finding the information that you're providing is really clear and concise. So
Thank you,
Thank you, Costa.
other people appreciate it as well.
Okay. Arran, I've got a few questions that have come through on your video that we posted. We've already posted up this morning where
Sure.
you went round and you walked us through the different zones here.
Yeah.
So one of the questions was when you, so you can see this random voice. In that video, you cut down some Asian greens. I think it was this row here
Yep.
where you had the capsicum growing.
Yeah.
And so the question was, when you cut down the Asian greens, are you actually pulling them out?
No,
or are you cutting...
we're chopping it off just above soil level.
Right.
It allows for all that, the root system, all that stored carbon to stay inside the soil.
Okay.
And the biology that was attached to that isn't being forced out of the ground, attached to those roots. It's being left in the soil, and therefore that's how we create that sort of pulse in the system through transitioning through different life cycles.
And then that was when the capsicum grew up, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Really, when you said you noticed that.
Yeah,
they
for
cut
sure.
down, I remember
Yeah, definitely. It was pushing its head. It was getting leggy and pushing its head just above the whole time. just trying to keep its head above the Asian greens. But then as soon as they chopped, boom, they bushed out, and away they went. Yeah.
Wow.
I've got one question here from Shobi. Hopefully I've got your name right, Shobi. Do you have a problem with possums and wildlife eating your beautiful veg?
No, I don't have any possum problems whatsoever. We do have a couple of possums that frequent the house up there in the food forest, but they don't really worry about the market garden whatsoever. We've had cows in here last week. They ate a lot of rainbow shard. They seem to enjoy the rainbow shard. I don't know what it was with the rainbow shard, but they ate a whole row of that. We've now chased them off, but no, that's the only thing we really have. We have kangaroos down here too, but the kangaroos, when we had the grass paths in the market garden, the kangaroos used to jump over the crops just to eat the grass. They never really ate any of the plants at all, and the kangaroos don't eat any of the plants. No, so we don't have any wildlife apart from the bush turkeys, which have been quite a hassle.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think also thinking about it positively, just trying to design things around the wildlife that is existing on the property already, not harming it or not driving it away, just working with it. We've built a lovely compost pile up the top there. It tends to frequent that compost pile. It never tends to frequent the market garden anymore. I think we've just given it something else to play with, so it doesn't bother down here. Plus also not using the mulch, has been key.
Another question from Ali. As a new gardener, I've been mainly exposed to the no dig trend. Yep. Why do you choose to till?
Why do I choose to till? Because I'm like I say, this garden here in its entirety has leapt out of the ground in 12 weeks. If I was using the no dig method, there's no way I could get the garden moving that fast. Once again, just thinking about the processes of production to do with a market garden scenario, it just really lends itself to using specialised equipment that help us manage the soil in a more productive way. I used to do a lot of no dig stuff, and at Millen Farm there is no dig gardens, and I have nothing against no dig gardens. It's just that thinking about the process of production just really lends itself to machinery and moving forward faster. Yeah.
Cool. Another question from Jess. You know, in the Moreton Bay region, you know, that we've been going through a bit of drought, bit of a dry spell at the moment. You know, particularly bad last year. How do you keep water up to your garden?
So we have a couple of dams here on site. We also have the roof up there. We store water in huge tanks all around, but the water management plan really comes down to using water efficiently and putting out the water in an efficient manner. So when we water here, you can't see any irrigation. I used to have all drip line irrigation running all up and down here, but we've changed over to a new chain of thought where we can use a wobbler sprinkler overhead. We can keep things moister for longer, and we can moisten the soil quicker. So rather than just watering in 2 lines, now we're watering the entire market garden. Everything gets watered. Takes about, so I do little cycles down the farm. It takes me about an hour and a half to water the entire farm. We do 20-minute cycles, and we do those 20-minute cycles about 3 times a week at the moment, because we've had no rain obviously in the past few weeks, so we've upped the water, but we're also always checking the moisture content of the soil just by feeling it with our hands, looking and observing what the beds are doing on top, and then of course it really comes down to what plants you're planting as well. So if we're doing seeds, we want to keep those seed beds moist, so they'll be watered, you know, maybe twice a day. but they're only watered for 10 minutes. And just really using water as wisely as possible, and thinking that the real holding capabilities of the soil comes from proper soil biology, and that's the water management plan comes from of the soil that we're creating here.
Cool. I've got a question myself. Have you thought of entering your garden into a art competition? Because it's just so stunningly beautiful. If we take a step down here, for instance, just how incredibly beautiful this is. Must make you really proud in terms of what you've been able to accomplish in such a short amount of time.
Definitely, yeah. No, it always astounds me how quickly, when you get going, how fast it can leap out of the ground. And then just trying to find, because we're on a limited space here, so really trying to find bed space and how we can manage beds as best as possible, for not only as fitting as many beds in as possible, but thinking about the water flows that happen here. So we've got a drain up the top there. The drain there captures all the water that comes down off from the hill. It flows down past this tap set up for the irrigation, and we create a couple of sacrificial beds. So this one on the end, down the end there, the water may flow through that one, so we can sacrifice the end of this. As the water hits the next bed down there, we can sacrifice that bed too. But it's about trying to create ways where we can make water flow so it's less damaging to the overall market garden itself, keeping flow happening, holding water where it needs to be held, and letting water flow where it also needs to flow. So trying to think about your water management also in terms of the outside water that you get from rain. And we get large periods of rain here, so they can be quite hectic. So really trying to think about how we manage water at maximum periods of rainfall, as well as through small periods of rain, how we can hold water but also let water flow where we need to.
Yeah.
And that way we're not wrecking any parts of the market garden that don't need to be.
Well, I think you've pretty much answered Jill's question, because her question was, does your swale mean that you need less water in the market garden? So
yes, it definitely does.
Yeah.
We've also got two swales that sit up on the hill up here. They protect this market garden, so all the water flows off the road down there, hits the swale drain, flows into the top swale, into the second swale, and then flows out down that end. So we've created a tree system now where the problem was, so turning the problem into a solution once again. So it's another permaculture sort of way of thinking about it, where it used to wash the market garden out all the time, but those swales now directing the water away, putting in all those trees. Yeah, it's a 2 for 1.
yeah.
Okay, Arran, I think I've got one more question and then we might wrap up.
Cool.
So my question is, we're here in Samford Valley, it's autumn and it's the subtropics here, because I know that we've actually got some international people watching, which is great. So we've got a lot of home gardeners who are interested, and a lot of people starting out new.
Okay.
Do you have have you got a top 5? Like, what could people plant now? What's
there's
easy?
heaps.
Yeah, what's a good one to start if you don't have a lot of experience?
The lettuces and Asian greens are a good one to start with. Asian greens are fairly easy. They get buggy quickly, so you really got to keep an eye on the bugs, because they've got that really soft leaf. But they're a good one to get started on and sort of build your planting regime up, because the brassica, the large brassica, the long-term brassica, obviously the cauliflower, the broccoli, that's all going to take you, 12 to 16 weeks to try and get ahead, whereas the lettuces and Asian greens, they pump out of the ground. But then also thinking about perennial things. In a home garden, perennial spinaches and all this sort of thing really lends itself to a home situation where you don't have the time to tend to it, but you can still plant these things and still create a harvest from something that doesn't need as much care.
Yeah.
There's many, the Syrianum spinach, Brazilian spinach, you name it. There's hundreds of those perennial things. So starting perennial or starting annual, I'd go both ways, but really trying to think about things that are going to be as easy as possible to grow, and that don't take as much effort to grow. Create success for yourself early rather than creating failures for yourself and thinking that you're a failure. So the broccolis and everyone loves those, and everyone wants to go for a broccoli and cauliflower, but that's 12 to 16 weeks that you have to care for that plant, constantly manage the weeds, constantly manage. You're almost setting yourself up for failure straight away. So those easy things, easy transition. Also, the beneficial bug mixers. This got up and running by itself. We didn't really have to do anything. The buckwheat came over the top. We chopped and dropped that buckwheat off, and that allowed all the marigolds, all these cornflowers, all these other even perennial species that are coming through that take longer germination rates. They're all coming through underneath there, creating that annual and perennial way of thinking and interplanting things.
And that was all through seed.
Yeah. That's the beneficial bug mix from Green Harvest.
Yeah, great.
Yeah. Super simple, super quick. The buckwheat grows a little bit fast and creates a sort of structure over the top, pioneer sort of stuff. Then you just chop and drop that, leaves all the flowers underneath. Yeah, it's amazing.
All right, well, thank you so much for showing us around.
Oh, no worries.
That was amazing.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for putting this on. It's really been fantastic. I enjoyed your garden yesterday too, Jason. It was great.
Jason came to the rescue this morning with the sound, so thank you for filming, Jason.
No worries.
And I'm glad you mentioned the beauty, because I was about to mention that. I was going to jump in there.
It's stunning.
I don't know.
It really is a piece of art. It's you should be very proud. Look,
there's something about vegetable gardens.
Absolutely.
They're a beautiful thing to see, and to be able to, especially when there's so many different things, and just the lines and the colour. I could spend a lot of time here.
Yeah.
So
there was a couple other questions, but Arran, I guess we'll probably have some other questions posted as well. Will you be able to go through and just give some answers later on?
Yep, I'll have some time around lunchtime, so we'll get on those questions around lunch. That'll be fine.
All right.
Okay, so I'll just finish up by letting you know that we've also set up a YouTube channel. It's called Samford Edible Garden Trail, and we're posting all of these videos over onto YouTube and then grouping them together, day 1, day 2, all the way down to day 14, which is the last day. And so it'll be really easy for you to go back and actually watch one of the gardens on each of the days. So please go over to the YouTube channel and subscribe, and you can stay up to date with all of that. So yeah, please post your questions, and again, thank you very much, Arran, and thanks, Jason. And enjoy. Thanks. Bye bye.
Thank you. See ya.